Welcome to the Mary Mac Show, where we will be talking about your feelings, experiences, and pain following the death of a loved one. Hello, my friends, my warriors. This is Mary Mac of the Mary Mac Show. I am so grateful to this wonderful woman who's agreed to start a series, which I'm entitling Death by Fentanyl. I have an intimate story about fentanyl when I was hurt many years ago, and I used the patches. And when I tried to come off of them, it was a very big deal. It took me 10 days to withdraw. And so I am speaking now in this podcast series about fentanyl and the deadly effects of what happens when you use only one time. You use it only one time. It could be laced in a joint. It could be one pill. And what's happening now is that young people are getting these pills thinking that they're Percocet or some other pain reliever, and it winds up to be complete fentanyl, killing them almost instantly. And so today I have a wonderful mom. Her name is Stephanie Hellstern. She's based out of Fort Worth, Texas, and I'm so grateful to have her. We're going to talk about her son, Kyle, who was only 16 when he died, and the traumatic effects of not only his death, but moving forward and trying to live with this every day. It's only been almost 3 years. His anniversary will be in 2 days. And I thought that was very ironic. We didn't know this about each other when we first discussed being together today. And so I want to welcome Stephanie. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me. Definitely a sign from Kyle, I think, right now to keep going.
Absolutely. So would you tell us about life with Kyle as his growing up years?
Yes. So he was 16. So, those teenage years are a little challenging. Um, He was very smart and bright. I know a lot of people always say their kids are great for everything, but he was very opinionated at times too. So he was very, yes, very opinionated and very into the political world as well, which I have none of that until now. And so I feel like he's guiding me for some of that. But he was one of those that was always a truth seeker for things. So for something like this to happen, it was really surprising. But he loved being outdoors. He loved fishing. He loved, any of that kind of stuff that you could do outdoors, anywhere from one of the things I had to let go of control of when he got older is he rode motorcycles. So I let him do it kind of earlier on, just because we did a lot of dirt bikes and smaller motorcycles when he was little. So when he had a passion, when he got older, I was like, I don't really want him to be on that. And that was my fear at first, was that would be the way he would go, not by just another driver not seeing him, on a bike, never of how we, lost him. But he was a great kid. He was very personable, as well as, like, he always kind of made jokes about things and made people laugh. And he was always a friend that you would want to have, growing up. So I think he got some of that from me because I was kind of a social butterfly, but he was more of the one that if somebody was picking on a kid, he would make it known not to be picking on that kid, and kind of step in and kind of diffuse the situation. So he didn't like any of that kind of stuff. So that was one of the things that I look back, and I'm so glad that I raised him the way I did, because who wouldn't want to? I was a single mom, so it was just always him and I. So a lot of our times that we spent was watching movies or watching shows. And he built his first computer when he was in middle school.
Oh my
And
goodness.
Yes, by himself. I remember later on, it was, I think his ninth grade year, and he actually, I feel so bad. He's gonna like be like, why are you telling the story, mom? But um, he actually had a gaming computer. He sold his computer that he did, and he had all the lights in it. And then he got a gaming computer, laptop, and he had told me he wanted to sell it. And he put it up on, I don't know what, one of the sites that he was trying to sell it on. And later on, he's like, Mom, don't be mad. I was like, what? And he had sold it. And of course, all kinds of things. When I tell you some of the story, you're going to be like, what? Why did he do this? But he thought he was getting old enough, I guess. And normally I had to explain to him basically what happened is he sold it to somebody and they gave him fake money.
Wow.
And it's kind of interesting I'm telling you the story because I never put this together for things too, but I remember how pissed off and upset he was about this fake money that he got. And then when I started asking more questions about, where'd you meet them? It turns out he had them drive to our house. And I'm like, Kyle, like, did you not notice if I ever buy anything off or OfferUp or Facebook Marketplace, we go to like a Quick Trip or we go to a Starbucks, we go to a public like area. It's like, you know, that's scary for us as, being a single parent and just us,
Sure.
And so I don't know what made me think of that, but I just remember, he was very disappointed about, that was a good gaming computer. And then he sold it and then had fake money. And then he was like, well, maybe I can use this fake money for something. And I was like, nope. So I took the
Oh
money.
my goodness.
I think he sold that computer for like close to $300 or $400. So, I mean, he thought, oh, I've got all this money. I could buy something else.
Mhm.
And then he's like, well, maybe I can buy. I'm like, no, we're not going to do this back to somebody because that
No.
I was like, I go, people actually get in trouble with that kind, the counterfeit money like that. So it's interesting. I'm kind of putting this together of like, not only was counterfeit money, he later was tricked for a fake counterfeit pill. I kind of just put that together. Like maybe that's a message that I can start actually using later. Yeah.
Wow. And when he was little, like tell us a little bit about when he was little growing up.
Oh my gosh, I could show you so many pictures of when he was actually little because as he got older as a teenager, he didn't like me taking pictures, and recordings and video. And so I looked through some of the ones for memories right now. Actually, recently I was looking and he was learning how to drive, but after he rode his motorcycle as a teenager, and he was like trying to put his hoodie on and like be like not, secretive of like because he didn't want me recording him. But when he but when he was little, okay, he was really into Spider-Man. So I've had signs from him, like when I went to New York doing stuff for advocacy stuff. I remember seeing Spider-Man in the middle of the park, like while we're doing, I'm like, okay, Kyle's saying he's here with me. So he always used to do the little Spider-Man thing with their hands, like um, so many pictures where he's doing that, or like I remember he would be like, oh, watch me break dance, and he would dance, and he was very, oh, he loved the camera. He just loved, making people just smile and attention, and just it was very different from a child too than like the later years as he got like, oh, I'm too cool for that, kind of.
Oh, wow.
Yes, yes.
So
Mm.
tell us leading up to the day that he passed.
Okay. To be honest, I think one of that's interesting is a parent's worst fear is I would say my worst fear as a teenager happened to my son. Like I
Interesting.
yeah, I was allergic to peanuts and eggs. I have so many allergies, it's crazy. And I was one of those that was like, I wouldn't try anything because I was like, I would be that one person that I would try it and something bad would happen. So
Mhm.
I didn't realize that until I start telling the story that man, my worst fear happened to him. And so leading up to it, ninth grade year, he was at Arlington Heights High School, and we had just moved to back to Fort Worth area from HEB ISD area, and closer to our
Where is that? I'm not sure.
let's see, it's about 20 to 30 minutes depending on traffic. So Fort Worth is about 15 minutes from downtown Fort Worth. And we we had been taken away for a while, I feel like, because his dad and I had separated and had broken up and just needed a new fresh start, new place, new friends, and he was doing so well. And then things happen in life, and I lost my job, and then I was like, well, let's move back towards where we can have more support. And so I moved back towards Fort Worth, and my family's all here, and I grew up in this area. So um I was really like putting my heels in. I didn't want to come back to the Fort Worth area, but you just trust what's happening. And so his ninth grade year, he was going to Arlington Heights. And I remember I was spending time with my cousin, Christy, and she was like, "Hey, let's have a game night." And went over there, had some wine, and then I decided instead of driving, I would just stay over there. And I think later that night, I finally I had all these missed calls, and I finally woke up, and it was my dad. My dad was calling me because he said, "Where are you? The police and ambulance are trying to get a hold of you. Kyle is in the ambulance." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so that was my first um situation that happened that was just like, "What do you mean?" And I immediately, got dressed, went over there, and my son was in an ambulance because what I found out is he had a bad trip. He had decided to try acid, which I am not condoning any kinds of drugs. And we had talked about everything, like, drug wise. We talked, being a single parent and very transparent. I was very sheltered growing up. But with him, I was like, I got to find that middle ground where I'm not your friend, but I'm your parent. And let's, be a safe place to talk about things. So we talked about sex, drugs, alcohol. Like his dad's side of the family really battled, drugs and alcohol and, poverty. So we talked about that kind of stuff. So it was a shocker to me that I'm on my way to go to which he was supposed to be at his best friend's house. And to my understanding, some friends were spending the night, and the dad was there. Well, turns out dad wasn't there. Dad was out of town.
Wow.
Um, yes. And so his best friend at that time had called 911. And, and I'm just going to be very transparent because some of the recollection started coming back as I was trying to put pieces together. And initially the best friend called and tried to blame that Kyle was the only one doing the drugs. And initially it was all of them. And blamed it on him and said, "Oh, he had a bad trip." They said he grabbed a knife. And, I'm a very spiritual person. So I'm thinking he's seeing demons or seeing something, it's very hallucinating stuff, and it was scary, to be honest. My son, and I'm about to do what he was doing. I don't know if anybody else has experienced somebody trying or doing it, but when I picked him up, you know how they talk about bath salts and things like that, that kind of zombie you out. My
Okay.
son, when I picked him up, was like just very just not all there. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, am I gonna have is he gonna have problems later? Like, did this fry his brain? Like, I'm just,
Right.
so many questions came up in my head and mind of, first I'm also pissed too. Like, why would you try, do this? And um I finally just when I finally got him, I made sure he didn't go to sleep. I started Googling things too, like, what do you do for this and that? And I just made sure he didn't go to sleep for a while. And then finally, when it seemed like it kind of started wearing off, I let him go to sleep. But that was the first like real instance that happened his ninth grade year. And I'm like, oh gosh, if this is what's happening right now, then I don't know what else will. But, you know, when I've shared that before, people are like, well, she should have known. Well, not really, because what I did immediately is my family knew that that had happened and they offered to help me move. I wasn't in the best part of town. I'm not saying it was bad, but it was more of middle, I guess, maybe poverty middle class of where he was kind of going and attending area. And so when my grandparents had several rental properties and they offered for us to move. And they said, as long as that best friend couldn't come around. And so it was easy for me to do because I could blame it on my grandparents. Like, hey, we're about to move to this. we're about to move to this new, this nice house. And the nice house, it had, a pool and a basketball courts, area. And he was going to be going to Brewer High School. And so that was, I was really glad. And I was glad because, the area was better and but never knew what we were going to be facing next, of some of it. So, the next transpiring things just kind of leading up to it, is that best friend followed us to that school.
Oh my God.
And so I had to set very strong boundaries. I remember my parents raised me very strict. And so I remember at that time, my best friend is also his best friend's, if that makes sense. So I have a best friend and it was her son. And so while we were
Okay.
best friends, our kids grew up too. So I remember also my parents had to, her upbringing was very more lenient than mine.
Mhm.
And so I had to um, realize, oh shoot, I might have to do what my parents had to do. And I started trying to sneak out and do things. And so I was like, I don't want that. I'm gonna set boundaries, but I'm also gonna say, hey, when it's a family function, because they were like family to us. So when it was a family function or something, we would go to it. And so I was like, you can talk to him, but he's not allowed over. I set, very firm boundaries on that. So he ended up getting kicked out of that school. So then we didn't have to worry as much, which was good. His best friend, not my son at that time. And so when the acid thing happened, I immediately called my best friend and I told her, and she didn't even know what had been going on. And
Oh
so
wow. That her own son had been kicked out of school.
yeah,
Wow.
well, she knew he had got kicked out because she was helping to enroll him in different schools, but she didn't know about her ex, the dad, that he was out of town when they tried the acid. And so it was kind of that opened her eyes that she needs to try to, there's only so much you can do when they become teens, and you try to tell them all the things you can, you try to protect them. And I know there was times when I even had contacted CPS because it was concerning to me of the environment her son was growing up into. And I knew that was his best friend, but at the same time, I'm like, Kyle, you got to love people where they're at, but maybe from afar, kind of thing. So I tried to keep him away, but not at the same time, if that makes sense. So it was, I didn't want him to rebel or to like sneak out or do other things.
Sure.
So leading up to the day he passed, he had gotten in trouble at school and they had put him, they had actually asked him to go to alternative school. And um, not a lot of people know this part of my story, and I'm very okay with sharing this part, but he had gotten caught with one pill that time. And I share this because eventually, when I'm able to talk to that school, Brewer High School, they told me there was a overdose problem, and that there was kids that were selling and doing things there, and but they didn't ever tell me about fentanyl. And that's why I'm being very transparent right now, is because that's one of the things that I feel like the school should be doing a better job about is, we can't, us parents can't do something unless we know about it. So I at least knew about, he got caught with that pill. He was a little bit more transparent on the people he was being around and influenced around. And so we had this is right all before COVID. And so right before COVID, he started going to alternative school, and then COVID happened.
Now he's home.
Now he's home, and now there's
May
more
I
I.
ask, may I
Yeah.
ask the pill that he was caught with, what was that?
So that's a part I don't know. And I to this day would have loved to know what it was. So initially, Kyle told me the day that he got caught, it was so surprising because we woke up late. Kyle was kind of my alarm, just to let you know. He was great. I sleep in. I like my time. And I'm a night owl, so that's why we're up late right now too. But um, we woke up late, and I said, "Oh, okay, it's fine. I'll just take you in." And I remember as he was going into the school, and a kid was leaving the school, they kind of did this dab thing real quick, and I didn't think anything of it. I was like, "Oh, he knows him." And then, not even before I'm about to pull up to our house, I get a call from the school, and I'm like, why is the school calling? I thought maybe Kyle left something. Nope, it's maybe I think like the assistant or somebody to the assistant principal, and they're telling me that he got in trouble and I need to come up there. And so when I immediately came up there, that's when the assistant principal came up, and we sat down, and I had already been texting Kyle, like, dude, you better tell me what's going on. If I hear, that was one of our rules, is if I hear it from someone else's mouth, it's worse.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yes. So, he was like, well, no, no, mom, and trying to like plead with me. And then finally, all this stuff starts coming out with the principal, and he's basically hanging out with the wrong kids. And, um, um, maybe even selling himself. And it sounded like it was this whole thing going on at the school that they were trying to crack down. But like I said, if I had known more about it, I could have cracked down even more. So during that time when he got in trouble, and then it was COVID, um, I immediately called his dad, and I knew his dad had struggled with all that kind of stuff. And of course, at that time, and I was actually sharing this with another parent, is I was already the parent that did both roles because his dad wasn't really involved. He was involved at the beginning, but when we separated, he wasn't as much involved. He always kind of kept telling me, you got it, you're doing a great job, kind of thing. But what he needed as a teenager boy, especially, he needed a man, a role model. I'm not saying that his dad was always the best, but he needed at least that connection. And just spending time fishing and hunting and things that I didn't do unless I was dating somebody, kind of thing. But his uncle was very involved, which was his dad's brother. And so when his dad reacted the way he did and told Kyle, he was kind of playing the bad cop and like tough love and thought that's what he needed. But afterwards, I'll be honest, Kyle was like, F you, dad. Like, what room do you have to talk to me? You're such a hypocrite. And then, like, slammed the door. We were in the car. And this is right after all when I found the pill, and he had to go to the alternative school. And I got out of the car and I said, Kyle, what's going on? He goes, he's such a hypocrite. You shouldn't be doing that. Like, and I got back on the phone with his dad, Steven, and I was like, man, I wish you would have reacted in a different way. Like, I should have been the bad cop. You should have been the good cop because you haven't been around. So he didn't take your parenting, or because you haven't been parenting or been around. So he needed him to be a person to be like, at that time, does that make sense? Like, he should have been the parent to be like, hey, man, I remember when I was in school, and I used to do this, and that, and I tried weed, or like, just being very transparent, and like, the nice cop is what he needed. And say, hey, let's spend time together. um that's what he really needed. So when his dad did that, I immediately called his uncle, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're not gonna believe what's gonna happen, or what did happen. And I immediately drove over there, and I said, Kyle, tell your uncle. And he was so shocked, and it was just like, dude, like. And I think what I'm realizing too with that side of the family is they realize they also had to change their ways, because they had a past life too that they had to realize too, like, we got to be a better example too. So his uncle at that time really stepped in. And remember, it was COVID, and I was doing taxes during tax season, and I do marketing. And that was when tax season got extended, right, until like July. So this time of year always kind of triggers me, because not only I lost Kyle, but then it was tax season extending. So I don't even do taxes right now. I know that sounds bad, but that's how much triggering that I had done. Why I got triggered from that was because I stayed late. So I'm leading up to Kyle's death. I stayed late to help somebody with their taxes. Their son was going to college, and he was like, hey, can you do this? And I was like, sure. And I text Kyle, and it wasn't abnormal for him not to answer. A lot of times he would be watching a game, or videos, and he would just reply later. And I stayed late trying to work on that person's taxes. To this day, they still haven't filed. So that is one of my rules. Yes, that is one of my rule of thumbs. I will never put another family before my own. If it's time to go, it's time to go. And so on my way home, I don't know, I just kind of got this weird kind of feeling, and he wasn't answering. But like I said, it wasn't abnormal. And normally he would call me, and I thought, okay, maybe he took a nap. He'll call me back, or I'll see him in the house. And of course, I was texting him like, hey, did you eat? I'll stop and get something. And I even stopped to get food. And when I also have this habit, I don't know how you are, but when you pull into the driveway, I kind of take that time to kind of like, because I haven't been on my phone texting, or so I checked my phone and all that. And then I went inside and I'm like, hey, Bubba. I called him Bubba. I'm like, hey, Bubba, I have our food. And I don't even remember what I got that night. It was probably tacos. We love tacos. Um, and or Whataburger or something, or I don't know. But I went in and didn't hear anything. And his lights off. There's barely any lights on in the house. It was because it was dark, and I'm like, okay. And right before I pulled into the driveway, I'd actually, when I was at the tax office, I had looked at his location, because we shared locations, and it looked like he had been down the street at the park, and then all of a sudden back at the house. So that's why I didn't think anything of it. But when I got into the house, I'm like calling out his name. I'm looking on the phone, and it says that he's there, at the house. And um, sometimes he would use my shower because I had a roommate, and I was like, well, maybe he's in mine, but normally he always told me. He was very good with communication. So that's what was very surprising leading up to all this is I didn't know. And I'm looking everywhere. And this is during COVID. And I had changed my garage into a gym. And so I was like, okay, maybe he's out there. Nope. I'm literally looking everywhere throughout my whole house. And so that's when I called his uncle, because he had just gotten back from a deep sea fishing trip. And they had went to Missouri too. And I called his uncle and I'm like, hey, Kyle's not with you, right? He's like, no. And he's like, well, let me call his phone. And so while I'm looking around, there's something that told me to go towards the back door and to go outside. And I know that was in my spirit, God trying to be like, hey, but I wouldn't have found Kyle. I found him in my backyard. If I had not turned on the light, and opened that patio door, I wouldn't have seen Kyle. He was on the ground on our patio, concrete, not in a chair. I had two chairs and a table, and he was on the ground, and he was on fertilizer, like the pink fertilizer on the ground. And I'm like, and I immediately like I was like, what the he's going like what are you doing, Kyle? Like, and then I realized he's not breathing. And so his uncle was calling on his phone, and it's going off while I'm calling 911, and I'm putting his uncle's on speaker, and he can hear everything. So he got there before the cops even came.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess just because of how I was explaining, Kyle, of what happened, he had came over with Narcan. I had never heard of Narcan. He sprayed up his nose. It was only one of them. Um, and I asked him later, why, and he said, I always have it on me. He had a tooth ache and almost overdosed from his pain meds once.
Wow.
Yeah, and so luckily someone had that on him, and they now give that with a prescription, which is good from the doctor. But that's when I went into trying to resuscitate him and trying to do the CPR stuff. And um, a lot of it's a blur, I'll be honest. I just went into fight or flight mode when trying to help. And when the ambulance finally got there, they did get his heartbeat going, but they basically said it would be brain dead. So
Oh,
there's a lot of, to be honest, there's a lot of that day. I wish to this day, I tell people now to put cameras. I didn't have any cameras. I have cameras up now. I wish I had cameras. I know I was a single mom, and I used to say, oh, I can't afford that, or why am I paying? But I think I would have had more answers if those were up. I could go back on
yes.
camera, or if I had, whenever I was at the tax office, I could have looked and said, oh my God, and then I could have sent somebody over. I called 911. That's one of the things I do tell parents now. If looking back of what I could have done differently is there's there's no good excuse of not being able to pay for safety or for reassurance of especially those teenage years. I don't know what you did at those teenage years. I couldn't, because my parents were so strict. But I hear all people's stories. I know what some of my friends were doing, sneaking out of their windows and things like that. But that
my,
yeah.
my brothers, not me.
Oh yes, 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 yes. I didn't either. So I didn't know. I didn't want to get in trouble. Like, I was like that perfect child. I didn't want to get in trouble. And so, going back to that day, that was the worst day of my freaking life. Like,
Sure.
I I think that's why this week is very hard for me. I was sharing with you is his 3 years is this Friday. And technically Thursday. So I get a day to myself before everybody starts actually messaging and texting me, you know. But just recently I have a friend from high school, Adrian and Christy, and they just lost their daughter. It hasn't been totally confirmed because it takes 3 to 4 months for autopsy, you know, they have 90 days to get back to you for the autopsy, but they're pretty sure it was the same thing, that it was a fentanyl pill. And so to me, hearing that and seeing it on Sunday, I immediately reached out to him, because he knew Kyle too, and he used to play Xbox video games with him. And whenever Kyle passed, we took a, a road trip with some friends and went to the ocean. So I offered the same thing. I was like, when you're ready, we can escape and get away. But it's been very triggering. It's kind of what I explain to people. It's kind of like putting salt in a wound. Even though I've
Sure.
been healing and been doing the work, it was very triggering again, because, you know, of things that, you know, it's like all the speaking out I'm doing. And I'm pretty sure they also talked to their daughter Lexi about, you know, it as well. And of course you can say all you want, and kids are still going to either peer pressure or try it because they trust the person, like my son did. So to kind of back up on that day, I immediately, you know, called. I was dating someone at that time, and immediately called him, and he came over, and then he started using my phone to call a lot of my family. I called my dad, and my dad started, you know, calling people too. And um I remember them calling his best friend too, and calling other people. And um that day was a blur, but there's some things that are starting to kind of recollect again, you know. They went to all of our neighbors to see what happened, to see if they have it on their cameras. And what's really hard about that day then to now, I am seeing a difference in my area. I'm in the Tarrant County area, and it's one of the largest counties, I think. I don't remember the stats of the counties, but just to give you stats of numbers, when I've done the research now of how many deaths. So Kyle, I said, died in 2020, right?
Mhm.
Um, in the year before, 2019, there was only 9 deaths for
Wow.
9. And the year Kyle died was 97.
Oof.
So that was during the COVID timeframe, right? And the year afterwards in 2021, there was 175.
Oh my God. So
And
it's almost,
then,
it just keeps doubling
yes, it keeps doubling.
recently.
Yes. And last year it was like 197 or something like that. I don't even know what we're at right now. I try to keep up with those numbers, but um that's what really, after Kyle, you know, that day of him passing, there were just so many I didn't have the answers, right? And I might not ever, but I'm hoping that the person that sold that pill, I have suspicions. And at first, the detective, because they saw it as a overdose,
Sure.
and that's what I really had to, and that's what I advocate on and trying to change the terminology. Um, is now calling it a fentanyl poisoning, because my son would be here today if he had had a real Percocet, just like some of the other kids that thought it was an Adderall, or like you mentioned at the beginning of this, like they're putting it in vape pens, they're putting it in nerd candies as well as the gummies. Like
Yeah.
it's literally what I try to tell people is, if it's not sealed by your doctor and it wasn't from a US pharmacy, you should not be even trying it, taking it.
Yeah.
Um, what's interesting is when Kyle passed, you know, it was during COVID, so it took 4 months for me to find out what actually happened.
Wow.
So that was a very like waiting game. And I remember, and excuse my language, but I remember thinking to myself, I believe COVID's real, don't get me wrong, but I was like, they better not pass this as no COVID bullshit.
Right. Yes, exactly.
And and
And
what's
it's come
interesting,
out now that so many of the deaths in a hospital were considered COVID deaths, but
yes,
the person died from a motorcycle
yes,
accident.
or cancer, or something that was like
Yes.
something else. And why I bring this up is because I think God and Kyle knew that I needed something to get me out of that bed. Because honestly, I have never fought depression, anxiety, or hopelessness so much in my life ever. Like, to kind of give you some understanding, and the audience too, is I was in a spiritual journey before Kyle passed. Like, I was in a real, we were in a good place. Like, I was making good money. We were talking about maybe even moving or traveling after I got done with tax season. I had never been in that part of my life where I felt like I was actually financially okay. And that's what I realized to this day is the enemy couldn't attack me anymore. So he
Mhm.
attacked through my son,
Mhm.
and the enemy used a lie to tell him that that Percocet would make him feel better, and not realizing that it would take his life and that it would hurt so many people around us. But um, I'll be honest, my faith has really, really, really been tested. Like, for somebody to be in a spiritual journey so well, and went to the King's University, and I got my master's in marriage family therapy. So I got a kind of a spiritual, like, clinical side of counseling. And afterwards, oh yes, I was very tested. I was very angry at God. I
Yep.
remember Yep, I remember the day that Kyle passed, I got in my prayer closet, and I was warring in there, and that was the hard time, is warring in that room and saying you raised Lazarus, and you raised, certain people, like, you've helped other people, and when they came back to me they that they couldn't bring him back, it was hard. Like, it made you think, like, what did I do to deserve
Oh,
something like that to happen to your child? And I think that was the hard part, is like, he was just at the height of, starting to live and do things, and us too, and like I said, I just had graduated and took that year off, and the enemy knew that there was more coming, and I think he attacked through that. He wanted, and that's why I tell people to this day, a lot of parents that lose their kids too, or their loved ones, they like, how did you make it? I said, it's not me. And one person's up there, and I truly believe that it's also been Kyle too, and God showing is, I've had so many different signs from him. The biggest one that was, and I shared it at his celebration of life, is I have this picture, it's of Jesus hugging somebody, and it's on the back of the head, it looks just like my son.
oh,
And that was when I didn't know what happened at first to Kyle, right? I There's a Facebook group for just our housing area, and I posted in there and I said, y'all probably saw the ambulances. If anybody saw anything, please let me know. And there was a couple people that said, my son knew of your son, but they weren't close. But they said, my son told me that his close friends poured out Percocets in honor of him. And I'm like, what? So that was my first thing. I had not even found out how he died yet. I'm still waiting for an autopsy. And
mhm.
because of COVID, it took 4 months. Like, I'm waiting for 4 months to find out what happened to my son. The only thing
For
I
the
knew,
toxicology to come back.
yep, for the toxicology to come back. The only thing I knew is I found in my backyard. It was the hottest day of the summer that year. And so I'm thinking, okay, the lawnmower's out, but isn't, like, normally he would tell me he was mowing the lawn. And I'm like, so of course, at first we didn't know what happened. We thought maybe it was an underlying heart condition that we didn't know about.
Right.
And then when it finally came back and it said acute fentanyl intoxication, I was like,
Holy
what,
Moses.
what is this?
Yeah.
Just like anything else, I Googled it and researched, and I'm like, okay, fentanyl. Like, then I started realizing what it was, and I always tell people, to educate. I'm like, fentanyl can actually be good, but it has to be done the right way. There's two types
Exactly.
of fentanyl. Like, you're sharing about your patch. Like, I've had people that have had, they hear my story and they start feeling condemned a little bit because they, had done that, or they were wearing one, and, that kind of stuff. And I'm like, no, if you're prescribed it, I totally understand. It means you're in severe pain, kind of thing. So, like I said, there's two kinds. There's the legal kind of fentanyl.
Right.
And that's the one you got. And it was prescribed by a doctor, and they know your weight and they know your height and they know your age, like they know how much you can be administered. Just like, I don't know if you knew this, but that best friend had a kid, a baby after Kyle, and she had to have an epidural. And I didn't realize the fentanyl was an epidural.
Really? I didn't know that either.
Yep, that was very surprising. I remember when she looked at me, she was like, and I'm like, it's okay, because normally I have you up to an IV, and then we had a grandmother pass away, and they gave fentanyl to her to help to ease the pain as she passed. So
Yes.
there's been like these instances of fentanyl, which is like, it helped me to learn that
Yes.
there's a good kind, which is the legal kind.
Yes.
But it can also be abused, and people, like, I've heard people taking the patches and even chewing on them. And I'm like,
I
what?
know. I
I'm
know.
like, that makes no sense.
But
And
they use fentanyl a lot of times instead of morphine.
yes, yes, exactly. Yep, yep. And I think that what I'm hearing is it's a different type of high as well. One of the things I learned, it's 50 times stronger than morphine.
Oh, yes.
Yep, yep. And the other kind, like I said, is the illegal kind, and that's what's coming through the borders. That's what's sometimes even, there's been some bust here of people trying, using the stuff coming from China to make the stuff here. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we have it from every area here and outside. That's like, we're kind of doomed of the fentanyl. I That was one of the things, like, I'll go back to when I got the autopsy. And when I got the autopsy, I immediately got this letter in the mail. And only a couple people have heard this part of my story. Is this is how I started fighting. This is how I started
Your
really.
activism.
Yes. And um, before this, I was working for NAMI. I don't know if you've heard of NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working at the Tarrant County one. And so I was already kind of doing activism, some with them, like about mental health and, stigma. And so I think that prepared me for this, because once I heard about fentanyl and I did the research, and then I get this letter from Tarrant County Public Health, and it's addressed to my son saying, "Dear Kyle, you tested positive for COVID on July 4th." And it's a day that my son died. And
Whoa. So
yes,
somebody gave him a COVID test
yes.
when
And I
he
remember,
was.
yes. And I remember that, like, recollecting of it. I remember they were like, "Hey, has he traveled?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, he was with his uncle and they're back." And they're like, "Okay, just to be safe, we'll do a swab." Well, what I'm finding out is there's a lot of departments not talking to each other. So luckily it's not on his toxicology and report.
Mhm.
And so it was just the Tarrant County Public Health. And so what I found out is, when I got that letter, I immediately got pissed off. I got in my car. I drove to the toxology, the coroner's office first to understand what happened. I was like, "Can you help me read the autopsy? Like, what's going on?" I said, "Why am I getting this letter?" And they said, "Well, it's two different departments." And I go, "Well, I'm kind of confused that it's here, but it's not here." Like, and I think, like I said, that's what got me out of bed. Like, nothing else at that time did. And so then I went over to Tarrant County Public Health. I was like, I'm livid. I'm pissed. I got this letter 4 months after Kyle passed. Like, why are you sending a letter? Like, if COVID is so severe and we need to take these precautions, like, what if I had other people in my family, like in my household? Like, if he had COVID, then we should have been alerted, called immediately, like, so we could have taken precautions at that time. But nothing was done. So what I found out is they were behind, and they were still sending these letters out to families and people to be careful that you might have it. And I'm like, that was 4 freaking months ago. And you're
That's
sending a
right.
letter that now my son is gone. I go, how many other people have you sent this letter to that maybe lost their loved one? So I was livid and pissed beyond anything. And so of course I did more research still on fentanyl, and the same thing, my schooling for my master's really started helping me during this time. I'm so glad God told me to go to that school and to learn the things I did, because what I started doing in that matter of time was, I did what I would tell someone else to do. Like being a counselor therapist, like, I basically said, Stephanie, what would you tell yourself if you were in the other side? Like if you were in the chair in front of you?
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, first I need to find a support group, right? Or I need to find others that are going through it. So of course this is during COVID. So I'm like, where am I going to find this? So of course I did marketing. And so I was like, you know what? There's all kinds of groups. We had a group for our mental health, you know? So I was like, you know what? Let me
Make
just
one.
yeah. Well, at first, what's interesting is I thought, okay, well, if there's not one, I will. Well, oh my, in 2020, around that time frame, um, yeah, in 2020, because I found out 4 months later, I started putting it in the search thing and I put fentanyl. All this stuff started popping up. And what I started realizing, I wasn't the only one there. So what I started finding out is that there was an epidemic within a pandemic basically going on and nobody was talking about it. It
Nope.
was all being hushed because of the COVID stuff, you know, and for Kyle's, they immediately closed his case and didn't even research or look into it. The detective didn't even call me to even tell me why he died. Yep, so since then I've had some words with the departments and other people too, and they are doing now differently, which is good. They now have a task force that just deals with as soon as somebody now passes. I've even told them I want to be a point of contact as well. So that gets into my advocacy. What I started doing is um, when I searched for some Facebook groups, I immediately added myself, I introduced myself, I started finding these people, and there was about to be an event in Ohio,
Hmm.
and it was going to be with the drug czar at that time. And I can't remember his name. It was during the Trump administration. So his drug czar then during 2020. And Jaime Puente, he lost his son. He was a past Marine, the dad, Jaime was, and then he lost his son. And he was advocating, he was speaking out. And he basically took me under his wing. And then when I went there and he invited me, I was going on a girls' trip to oh, I don't even remember, sorry. But I was going on a girls' trip and I was going to Georgia and I wanted to go to the wine country. I needed to get away. And then I said, you know what? As soon as I go there, I was supposed to come back, but I was like, you know what? Ohio's like not too far. I'll just go to Ohio. And so yeah, there was about 20 of us, I think, maybe 20 to 35 people, and all of us were sitting around this table, and we all had lost our loved ones. And at that time, I was the youngest. I had the youngest child
Hmm.
at 16, and then since then there was one that was 14, and it just kept getting smaller. And I remember at that time I was like, yes, I'm meeting all these good people, and they started taking me under their wing. And that's kind of what helped me with my advocacy too, is they were all up north, and that's what I was realizing is that this epidemic had been happening for a while. It started probably 2015, 2016,
Yes.
maybe. Yep. And I have this chart and it literally does this all the
Hmm.
way through now. And what it was is it was happening at first to homeless and addicts. And it was being mixed, fentanyl was getting mixed in with their heroin or crack or
Well, they
the,
were, I remember interviewing a girl for a blog I was writing back then, and in 2015, and her brother was killed, but at that time she was calling it opioids. Okay.
yes.
But it's technically the same thing,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
So she didn't use the word fentanyl, but she used the
Yes.
word opioids.
Yes.
And he was, I think he was in his mid 30s. I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but I have to look her up and see if she
Yeah.
wants to tell his
Well,
story.
yeah, look her up, because you know what I'm finding out is now that I've been speaking up and I say we need to change our mindset, just like with mental health, right? Remember I told you I
Mhm.
worked for NAMI, and this
Yep.
is what helped me with I had a marketing background. So I think this is what helped me with my advocacy too, is the same thing. We would change people's mindsets for mental health. It's not being crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's a disease, and it's something that needs to be treated and talked about. Talk about the depression, talk about the anxiety and hopelessness. And that's what I realized is stemmed even from the substance abuse disorder, or
Yes.
my SUDS, or even, for example, my son. He probably thought, okay, I'm back. Let me just chill out. Let me try this, like, let me like I said, what I found
Yes,
out.
he didn't think very much about it. He
No,
was
no,
just
no.
like, oh, I just try this and see how it works.
Yeah.
And that's the problem because young people, they tend to turn to substances instead of other avenues of
Yes.
relief.
Yes.
And for me, that's really the saddest part of it all.
Yes.
You
No,
know?
I totally agree. And that's one of the things that I tell people is there's three areas I'm fighting for right now. And that is the first time users like my son. Yes, maybe he dabbled in it recreationally, trying who hasn't at times. And then the second one is the ones that maybe in the same instance tried it, but then become slowly addicted to it because they don't realize they're getting fentanyl. And then
Right.
it's the third, the SUDS, the substance abuse disorder, where they get so addicted to the fentanyl that that's what they're chasing is that high. And those are the three areas we're fighting for. It is hard and it's sad, like just like when just losing that friend, their kid this weekend. I'm just like, I've been working this long for it, and now to happen to someone even closer, I'm like, please everybody talk to your kids. I'll talk to them if I need to, like,
Right.
kind of thing. So
And I think for me, the biggest part is these these kids. I mean, as we go into this next phase of life where there is so much depression, so
yes.
much economic depression,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know, we're moving into a world that is not going to be the best.
Yes, no, I agree. And we got, yep, we got to talk
People
about things.
really, people are losing jobs.
Yep.
Families are having to move together. It's like
Yes.
back in the 1950s where you had like three generations of people in the same household.
Yes.
It's getting to that place.
Hmm.
Um, Parents are moving in with children who have children
Hmm.
and trying to balance all those relationships, the emotions, the
Yeah.
small spaces,
Yes.
the less of things, less
Mhm.
cars, less
Yeah.
space, less houses, less everything,
Yeah.
not being able to have the kind of life they had before where they can just go out and be with their
Yes.
friends. They can just take the car and go. Well,
Yeah.
maybe there's not a car for them to go with anymore.
Yes.
So life is completely downgraded and it's only going to get worse.
Hmm.
And I just foresee so many of these young people not being able to cope.
Yes.
And we have to make sure they understand that it just
Yes.
takes one pill, you know?
Yes.
It
Yes.
just takes one time.
Yes.
I know you're trying to escape, but that escape may be permanent.
Yes, exactly. You know what? That's a very good thing that I just did a documentary. Texas Pictures went around and they're going around all the Texas area right now, and they've been doing documentaries on our loved ones we lost. And that
Oh,
was,
wow, that's great.
yeah, I'll share it with you so that way you can see it. But I mean, he's doing so well. He's about to go to San Antonio. He did some here, did some in Austin. And one of the things that I said on there that he said, Stephanie, I think you hit it on on the head of the nail, is I said, it's that one pill, that one time, but I also know if I could have if I could have gone back and I could have just told Kyle, hey, that one pill is not going to make you feel better. It's not going to take away anything. I think it could have saved his life. And so that's why I started the advocacy. I started Kyle Still Speaks. It's a nonprofit in his honor.
That's
And
wonderful.
yes, so I do these little wristbands. I have them on me right now, but basically it's it has Kyle Still Speaks on one side, and then the other side says one fake pill can kill. And so what I do with that is I always tell myself, okay, God, when I go out, show me somebody I'm supposed to talk with, or so I put like three or four on a day, and if it's maybe like a waitress or a cashier, if they're young, I normally will just hand it to them. It's a really good, just kind of set of a business card. I just use that.
That's
And
smart.
yep, I use that, and I say, hey, I don't know, sure, especially if it's even in the area or anywhere. I say, hey, I'm just, I just wanted to bring awareness. I'm not sure if you've been hearing about or if you even know what fentanyl is, because they read it and they're like, one fake pill, kill. They're like, what fake pill? So I did that on purpose because I wanted people to,
Ask.
yes, ask and be curious, and I think that's what we need to do to grab the attention of people too. Is we have to have some of that curiosity,
Hmm.
and that's what killed Kyle, was that curiosity. I think originally what I found out is his friend, really good friend, he, I guess, reached out or whatever and wanted to buy weed that day, and he didn't have weed. All he had was that Percocet, and
Mm.
I don't blame. I had to finally do a lot of inner, you
Soul
know,
searching.
yeah, soul search of battling, because I couldn't let my heart have so much anger around, the friend. I don't believe his good friend knew that that's what it was. But I also, like I said, there's a lot of missing pieces of that day. Like, there's two things that could have happened that day. Either Kyle went down the street. Remember, I told you I saw on his phone that he was
At a
down the
park.
street at the park or something. Either he hopped in the car and was hanging out with them there, took it, and they took him back and basically dumped his body in my backyard. Because the reason I have the kind of suspicions around this is that fertilizer I said, that's not where it was. It was in a bag somewhere else, so I'm kind of and that gate was locked, and I never lock that gate to get to our backyard. Usually it just had a little hook, and the ambulance and his uncle had to break that. Like, the uncle had to hop the fence, and then when the ambulance came, they had to knock it down. So to me, it's almost like somebody was trying to hide something. So, like I said, there's two things that could have happened that night. That happened, and that friend or friends dropped him off to try to cover it up, and didn't call for an ambulance or call for help. Which that's the part I'm upset about. Is that there's a short window of fentanyl. What it does is it slows down your breathing. So that's why a lot of times for the legal kind, they put you on IV to help with things and a breathing thing. But fentanyl, it slows down your breathing, and it stops the receptors to your brain. And so it doesn't tell your brain's not telling you to breathe. And so that's why they got Kyle's heartbeat going, but that's why he was brain dead, because they didn't have those receptors there. And so, like I said, there's that first instance that could happen, or the second one is the friend came over, was in the backyard hanging out. They decided to take it. It affected one or the other, and then it affected my son, and still didn't call the cops. Or he could have been by himself. I'm not totally, that's one of the things. If I could have a fairy godmother, or God reveal, he's been revealing the truth slowly but surely. I just want that friend just to come forward. Like, I just need, it's been 3 freaking years, and at first I used to blame myself, and I had a lot of shame and guilt, and then I blamed God, and then now I realize it was the enemy that stole my son and lied to him. But I wish, if I could have anything, it would be to finally know the truth. Like, what happened that day? Like, was he with somebody or not? Or like, like, it's just the unknown answers. And I've kind of gotten to a point where I might not ever know.
Right.
Um, but since my advocacy and starting Kyle Still Speaks, um, and going to the schools, like, I think the first year when I was speaking out and started all the social media, I'm working on the website still, and speaking out, I got to speak even at his old school, not the high school he was at. I'm still trying to get into those schools. That's why I was calling the schools out earlier. But it's been really hard, because I'll tell you why it's hard of getting into the schools, which we've changed recently, and I'll tell you that in a minute. You know what I'm about to tell you
Yep,
later.
yep.
Um, but what's been hard about getting into the schools was because everybody wants to act like we don't have this problem.
Yes.
And it's happening everywhere. Like, I will say, one of the things that I share with a lot of parents right now is um it is okay. And I'm giving you permissions. If you parents are listening, or grandparents, or whoever, even a loved one, it is okay. You pay for their phone, you can access their phone. I know we always talk about, oh, I'm gonna give them some privacy. No, the reason I was able to get in Kyle's phone that day he passed and get into all the social media, because one of the rules is if you make an account, you're using the Gmail that I have access to, so that's why I was able to reset or do anything I needed to get into a Snapchat, to get in his Instagram stuff. Like, I tell parents that it is okay. I'm giving you permission right now that they can get into their phones, because you need to know who their friends are, who they're hanging out with. Like, one of the things I realized after Kyle passed is he was basically living a double life. Like, he was hanging out with the wrong kids for a while, and he had came forward when I took him to his uncle. He finally broke down. I had never seen Kyle cry like that ever in my life. He just, because he knew he was going to get in trouble and maybe get on probation. We didn't know what was going to happen. He had a substance on premises, and I did the poker. I'm not talking until he was going to tell me what was going on. You know what I mean? Because whoever talks first breaks, loses. So he didn't know I knew this, but I'm to giving y'all parents a little trick, and anybody else that needs it is, I was like, nope, not saying anything. And that's when he did not like the silent treatment. And that's when he just broke down and was like, Mom, I got something to tell you. And so that's when he just started telling me some more things about the people he was hanging out with, like they were, just not doing basically it sounded some gang things that were happening. And so he was just, and that's why I had to immediately take action, take him away from all of that environment. But I'm glad that at that time I got because it was COVID, so I was also at home. So I'm glad at times I was able to spend a lot more time, during that times too. But um yeah, like, just the advocacy, like I was saying, getting back on track of, is the schools. It was really hard getting in, but I got to speak at the HEB ISD. There's been some other schools that are very, like, they're like arms, like, we need people here speaking, because they said since COVID there hasn't been as many speakers. And I'm like, sign me up for when it's beginning of school, the end of school. Like, people need, because Kyle died during summer, and that's the same thing that happened to my friend's daughter. Like, they're out of school, they decided, oh, I'm going to try something. And so we need, I don't know if you've seen, but there's two now fentanyl awareness days, and one of them is around the summertime. I think it's like May, June, somewhere. And then the other one's in August timeframe. So it's like we kind of hit both areas when it's like summer and they're out and they're about to go to school. So it's really nice of having those fentanyl awareness days. And that's from other parents advocating, like, losing somebody. It sucks that it takes you losing somebody to actually start making that difference. But um, since start,
But I want it to be awareness every day.
yes, I know
You
exactly.
know, I like it years ago, 20 years ago, I started the Foundation for Grieving Children.
Yes,
And
yes, yes,
over time, everybody's made all these different nonprofits so that they can raise money, right?
yes,
They create an awareness day
yes,
or an awareness month. And I'm
yes,
like, excuse me, but this is supposed to be every single day that
yes,
children are grieving,
yes,
you know?
yes.
So
No.
I'm a little bit I'm not crazy about these days.
Yes,
You know what I
yes,
mean? It's
yes.
like this is something that everybody should be aware of all the time.
All the time. I agree. I agree. And that's one of the things that before, so of course, what I'm about to say on some of the stuff, some of the advocacy. Um, I don't, I look back and I haven't realized what I've actually done until somebody like my stepmom and my parents, my dad, and some of my family have been like, as soon as I'm not much of a boasting person, and they'll be like putting the article and be like, met with Governor Abbott, or met with Mayor, Mayor this, or met with a sheriff. And I really, this is one of the things that's been eye-opening for me is God told me to build it and they'll come.
Oh,
And there was another founder. She started APALD, APALD. It's Associations of Parents Against Lethal Drugs. And Diane decided once a year they would throw a rally. And it was a fentanyl awareness, any kind of drug awareness kind of rally. And at first, I wanted to just go to the Austin one, and then I felt God was like pulling on my heartstrings and was like, oh no, you're starting right here. And like after church one night, one day, and I battled the church thing because I wouldn't go at first, and then kind of finally went, and I just cried it all out. And I remember it took me through downtown Fort Worth, and he said, he basically, I felt like he was guiding me. And I parked on one side of the building, and I was looking at some of the, sometimes there's statues at some of the courthouses. I stopped at the Tarrant County Courthouse, and there was a statue, and I felt like he said, nope, not here. I was like, okay. I kept going. And then I came to this water fountain. And this is what's neat about this, and kind of signs from God and Kyle, is this water fountain. Um, I went to, and I said, I felt like he said, here. And I looked at this little plaque, and it was done by the Women's Society or something. And it was, they made that for, I don't remember the specifics, but basically it was a Women's Society that had put that there. And it was kind of like showing me, hey, mom, I'm, or, I'm right here with you. And so I threw my first rally that following year. So I think I've thrown 3 so far. So every year around May, June time frame, I throw a rally at the Tarrant County Courthouse. It's grown. Like if I showed you pictures from, which is sad at the same time, but if I showed you, we first did the rally right at that little fountain, and I'm standing up there, and I have my like little megaphone, and I'm trying to get people's attention. We made all of the signs by hand with markers, and we're standing at the corners like fentanyl is poisoning. And that's where all this kind of, we started trying to change the terminology, like I said, with the mindset of, the old mindset was overdose, that it's something that they took, and they overdosed and they took too much. Well, now it's a new terminology, and it's a new mindset. And that new mindset is that fentanyl poisoning is that most of those,
Lethal is
yeah,
lethal.
and most of those people, like if somebody put something in my water right now, or alcohol drink, they would say I was poisoned. So that's where we cut, like, and that's when when I met with Governor Abbott. So what's interesting is that one rally opened so many doors, and God told me build it and they'll come. And what's been so neat, and just, when I look back, my dad said I need to work on a little portfolio of the things I've been doing. But what's neat is once I did that, people like Channel 11 came out, because I
Oh,
finally,
good. That's good.
yeah. So
I was
so
going to
what's
ask you if you had gotten some coverage.
So, you know what? I'll be honest, that first year, none. I reached out, I was sending my story out. I was using all my marketing skills, nothing. It was like crickets. And because I said everything was COVID time frame, and and then that was the presidential stuff, all that stuff was going on. And then finally I got Channel 11, Jason Allen. And to this day, I think that man, he's a father himself. And I reached out and I said, I won't interview with you if you use the word overdose, though. I was very, and I tell that to my parents and everybody else. I go, make sure who you're interviewing with, you're very specific on, they don't twist the story, or, that kind of stuff for their agenda, because we're doing this, giving our story and our time for what we're trying to, and our message. And he did a great, that was the first time I think I had cried in a while when I saw my Channel 11 story, because he did such a good job of piecing my story and Kyle's story. And then he actually did all the research of, like, that's where I got the numbers from our counties, and, and just he did a great job on that. And so since then, he comes out to the rallies. And then since then, now it's kind of been this spiraling thing that other people now are like, hey, can I talk to you? Or can you, tell me about this? And what I started realizing when I started seeing those numbers, I was like, you know what? I can't just make this about Kyle. Yes, I lost him, but that's when I decided I was going to start the North Texas. And I started North Texas Fentanyl Coalition, which is NTXFC for short, because long name to say. But what happened is anytime I saw an article, or I saw somebody that was young dying, or I found out what was happening, or maybe I could find out, I would wait until like a news article, or I could find, it, because our county reports it and says their names. It's all public information. And I find them. If it tells the person's, name of a grandparent or a parent or anybody, the child that they lost or the spouse that they lost,
Mhm.
I I look on Facebook and I try to find them and I reach out and I'm like, hey, just let you know. And what initially happened is I started with Kyle Still Speaks. And then the next route is I started adding these people. And then when I started having about 30, 40, 50, and then my numbers were growing,
Oh my God.
I was like, wait, I got to do this. This is bigger. So that's when I formed the North Texas Fentanyl Coalition. And we're throwing an event actually on July 24th here in Grapevine, because there's actually been the Colleyville Grapevine area. They've been having some deaths and, overdoses and fentanyl poisonings in that area. And so it's been interesting, like I said, how God's kind of opened doors, but also put people in my life that are also on this journey, because um, I met what's good is I met Christina. She lost her daughter, Angelina. And then I met Ophi, and they lost their son, Sebastian, and they started helping with billboards. So, like, all of us, what's sad is all of us parents are doing it all ourselves, like coming out of pocket to,
Oh
do that.
yeah.
Yeah. And so just all that stuff is just been very hard, but we just keep going and doing it, right? And so trying to bring resources in and trying to be just trying to do all that. And so finally, when I did that rally, I met Sheriff Wayborn. And then I met Sheriff Wayborn, and he invited me to the panel with Governor Abbott.
Ooh,
And
nice.
yes. So when he opened that door, I got to tell Kyle's story. There was Virginia Krieger she was with the Fentanyl Awareness Coalition, and then also with the Lost Voices of Fentanyl. And Lost Voices of Fentanyl go every year to Washington, D.C. to do their march to do that. And but when we talked to the governor, I was like, Governor, and every time he used the word overdose and the sheriff would use it, I would say, we need to change it. Because I told him, I was like, we're educating, and that's what we need to do with also everybody else, is educate. Is um, if everybody doesn't know about it, then how is anybody going to be able to respond or to, you know, tell their loved ones or anything like that. So since then, now I've been on the panel now twice with Governor Abbott. We just had our recent one this year. It was called the One Pill Kill Summit. And it was
I really like that line.
yes, yes, yes. And since then, so I was invited originally because they knew I was with the original panel. And since then, and you probably saw it at the signing, is I now have another Stephanie with me, warring with me. There's a Stephanie Tucker. Stephanie, yeah, she lost her son Tucker. And Stephanie, oh, I just went blank on her last name right now. I call that grief fog. I forget names like that.
It's okay.
She started Texas Against Fentanyl. So we partnered up with them. So on a bigger, and so she's the one that's really pushing with the governor. And so they partnered with them for that One Pill Kill Summit. And she's the one that helped with writing some of the bills too. I I I have no experience in that, but I'm just, I was like, let me know how you need me. And she's the one that started the Tucker law. And that's what got passed just about a couple weeks ago. 4 laws passed.
Yes.
One of them was now it's going to be murder. And I think the second one is now with the Tucker law, it's going to be Stephanie Turner. Sorry, I finally remembered her name. Stephanie Turner, her son was Tucker Rowe. And so with that, they're going to, because what we found out is we were going into schools and only certain schools would let us in. And so finally, when we were at the panel, we were asking the governor, we're like, it's just not working. They're not letting us. And so finally he had 3 panels. The last panel was the Texas Education, the Texas Health Department, like all the big key people on his team. And he said, well, if they're not going to do it, how can we make them?
I love that.
I was like, thank you, thank you. Because so what he realized is he talked with the CEO of the Texas Education Agency, and so he was like, we're gonna have to make them. We're gonna have to have a curriculum. We're gonna have to have a law. So it's still, the curriculum is still being made. I think we got it approved for 6 through 12. We do want to do middle school and some elementary too, but we're going to first start there because that's the majority of the group that's dying right now. But what we are going to do, just to let you know, because there's probably teachers and schools watching this. we are not adding more work to y'all, I promise. What we're doing is we're going in lieu of the things that the teachers and are already doing. So if there's something in social studies or if there's something in science, we're having curriculum kind of fall in line with that stuff. So it's not added work for them. So that's one of the pluses of the curriculum we are writing. This company has already written several other curriculums before too. And that's one of the things I'm really happy about right now is that. And then I think I can't remember the other two things. I know it's on my Facebook of what was done too, but I know one of the others was just it was changing the terminology to fentanyl poisoning and actually have it on their death certificate because, you
That's
know,
good.
yeah, because there's some people that can't get their life insurance policy because it's seen as a drug or overdose or
Oh my goodness.
yeah, so and then also for us, we couldn't like for my as soon as Kyle passed, because it was seen like that, I couldn't even get victim I couldn't go in the
Compensation?
yep, nope, I couldn't. And so that's something that's also going to be helpful for, people going forward,
So they
and
changed that with the Crime Victims Board?
yeah, so they're still trying to work on it, I know, but he passed the law. So what they're going to work now is with them to, because, things always need to be updated, right? And so I do know the coroners, not to be mean, I thank you for all the what the coroners do, but they need to update their classifications too, because
Mm-hmm.
fentanyl poisonings are getting lumped in with the overdoses, and we need to start differentiating so that way, for example, if there's somebody next door to me that's having an overdose or it's a fentanyl poison or whatever it is, and we have to administer Narcan, we just need to have better tracking of that. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that was maybe one of the other ones is they're working on, oh, I can't think of the name, but there is a tracking for where some of the overdoses and things are happening. So that way we can actually start sending out resources in those areas, which will be very helpful as well. So from my advocacy, I do smile at times, because I'm like, man, 3 years on this journey, I was starting, you start getting tired, to be honest. Like you just, when you're about to just be like, okay, I'm done, I'm giving up, then something like this Sunday happens, or like this podcast, like, his anniversary is coming up. And I think that Kyle and, God do that to remind me, like, I see you, we hear you, we're helping you, we're fighting up here and you're fighting down there. So, um, my next thing for myself is um, I took 3 years off to work on my self-care, and I was 4 points of passing my licensure test for my LPC. So that's my next goal is I'm trying to get back into the mental health field. Which I started working doing QMHP, just a qualified mental health professional, more of a caseworker. And so next I want to be on the other side again, like why I went to school. So that's the next thing is why I want to do that too is with the nonprofit. I want to actually offer grief support. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to raise a little bit of the money too, because a lot of times it's been coming out of my pocket, but raise the money so that way I can pay for some of the billboards. I know Governor Abbott mentioned that, hey, we're sending 10, we're going to do 10 million for all this marketing. We haven't seen it yet. I'm holding on to his word of it. And they are reaching out to us now as the Angel Moms, the health department, to ask us, like, hey, the first phase went out. Here's the second phase. We need real life stories. Like, so we're hoping that they'll keep utilizing us because we've been on this journey longer, and we already know what message, like no point to reinvent the wheel other than if you want to, you can add your logo, but just take what we've been working on. We don't mind. Like that's what we've been working on and paying for. So I think that's the biggest thing. And what I could tell other people is, you might think this isn't going to happen to you, but as soon as you think that, that's when, I mean, honestly, I never thought I would be dealing with drugs, like, or want to be dealing with drugs. Like the two things as a counselor, I said I would never work with was grief and addiction.
Isn't that interesting?
And look where he has me going. So I share that because, you know, we all have things we're supposed to be helping with in life. And I think, you know, if you hear this and you're seeing this, you now can't say you didn't know. And, that's what I always tell people is you can't stay quiet. You need to talk to you. I always tell people talk to your kids as young as 3, 4, 5, because we need to have that same mentality about the Halloween candy. You know what I mean? Like, I know there was some debunking on the news and some other places saying, well, they're not doing that in Halloween candy. Well, technically, yes, they were not, but you never know what person is out there. I mean, there's the gun shootings, everything. I mean, right now, if somebody wanted to, they could put fentanyl in our water and kill us, or put it in our food, or like what they said, there's gummy bears. Like, somebody could be mad and decide they're gonna, you just. So I tell people we need to have the same precautions that we would do like on Halloween day. I remember when I used to dump my candy out, and if it wasn't sealed and
Right.
tagged, we look through all their stuff. And that's the same thing we need to take right now, is that same approach, is protecting our kids, talking about it, talking about loved ones. Like, you know even if you've lost somebody, share that story. Don't keep it from the kids. Like, of course, depending on where I go of the school, I talk differently, but I'm very real and raw when they start getting older, because they need it. They need it. They need to hear that, hey, I always ask them, do you want the kid to your left? I always have them look to the left, look to the right. Do
Uh-huh.
you want those people making your decisions for the rest of your life? You will, if you decide to take a pill, or decide to try something that because you gave into peer pressure, or because you wanted to be cool. And I think that's where I think, if I can give any advice to, is I noticed that Kyle, I don't think it was really peer pressure. I think it was more of, he was looking for answers, and I think he wanted to numb out a little bit. I think he also, um, you know, maybe did not seem like he was a punk, like that kind of thing. I think that's kind of thing is, in his head, he wanted to be cool. And I think that's what cost him his life, is, even though he would say he didn't need to do things to be cool, he was one of those, like, oh no, mom, because he wouldn't wear the name brand stuff. He'd find his own designs, his own shoes that were all very unique. But when it came down to it, I look at it, is we all want to be loved. We all want to be wanted and needed. And
And
Kyle,
accepted.
yeah, accepted. And one of the things with Kyle is he his later years, he started rapping. Oh my gosh. There is, I do have some that he was actually okay, but God kind of let me let him express, because there was a Biggie Big, that raps. He started at his young age, and he used to rap about his dad. And that's what God was showing me, is Stephanie, like, he's finding an outlet to voice what he's going through. And so I let it at first, and I share that because one of the things Kyle wanted is he wanted to be famous. And I don't think he ever thought in this way, is telling his story over and over, and bringing, awareness to something so deadly and so potent that it's killing. I mean, you the numbers are crazy. We're almost 100,000 of just overdoses. And if I think the percentage of them that are actual fentanyl poisonings is 80%. The
Wow.
rest is regular drugs that they actually overdosed. So that's why I constantly speak out about it. And, you said you interviewed that lady. Now when I hear people's story, I feel like I have a little bit more compassion, and I always had empathy, but a little bit more compassion when somebody says they lost a brother or a family member to SUDS, a substance abuse disorder. I always ask them what from, and if they say heroin or whatever, I go, and I ask them what year, because then that's when I tell them about Kyle, and then I talk about fentanyl, and I go, do you know if fentanyl was involved? And so many people didn't talk about that, or use it, or put it on the stuff on the autopsy. So that's one of the things I try to open up people's eyes to, is that it's so deadly, and it's something out there that if we're not talking about it, we're just going to have more deaths. And we just need to expose the truth.
Very true.
Yes, yes.
Stephanie, this has been a marvelous time together.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you spending so much time with us, and really talking so deeply about everything that happened with Kyle and you. And I'm just so sorry you're going through this.
It's I would say I thought being a single parent was hard, and going through an abusive relationship, but this is something beyond words. I try to explain to somebody, there's two ways I try to explain grief, and maybe you'll relate to this too, is what I realize is I've had a train wreck. like the worst train wreck where I'm injured and I'm building me the train back up and I'm building my tracks again. And I explain that in one aspect when I try to explain about grief and the grief fog, and I try to explain that the stages, it's not this linear thing. It's this this ball
It's this,
of
yes, it's this
yes,
roller coaster. And in the
yes,
beginning, it goes like boop,
yep,
boop,
yep.
boop, boop. But then as time goes on, it just gets a little more rolly,
Yes,
you
yes,
know?
yep. And I say, and I love the ocean, and that's one of the areas I try to escape and do my self-care. And there's a quote that somebody left on my Facebook page, and I'm so glad they did, because I think they lost a parent, and they said, I know it's not the same, but I lost my dad. Or and it talked about how grief is like the ocean, and it's ebbing and flowing, and it sometimes those waves crash over and sometimes they're still. And that really stuck with me for a long time, so that's something I use with people too, like my friend that just lost their daughter. And then the other kind of concept I tell people is, you know, um, I got in a car accident right after Kyle, and that was kind of a wake up call to me too. And I remember I was on my right side, so my shoulder, I'm still dealing with the litigations, which ugh, is a mess itself. I've been dealing with that for 2 years, and I have my right shoulder, right? My wrist still hurts, my ankle still hurts, and I have to constantly still deal with that pain and that injury. So sometimes I tend to move a little bit more, or lay on a certain side. And so I explain that as grief too, is the same thing as a high school injury, that you had. You just learn to live with it, and it sucks, and it's still there, but and it won't ever go away. And I tell people, I've fired 3 therapists, just to let you know. 3 of them.
I've done
Three.
that kind of thing too.
Yes, luckily I knew, because what they were trying to tell me, they were trying to tell me I should be over it, or I shouldn't
Oh,
move forward,
yeah.
or not move forward, but they were telling me get over it basically.
Yes, yes.
And so
Move on.
yes, move on. And I try to tell, like, so now what I tell them, like, no, it's us moving forward, learning to deal with the pain, dealing to deal with getting out of bed. Like, that was one of the things I would say as a counselor therapist prior to losing Kyle. I had a very positivity, like, the glass half full, and very uppity and very bubbly before. Now I'm kind of more mellowed out, and I can really relate to the client a little bit more, because before I'd always be like, well, why can't you just get out of bed? Why can't you just walk to the mailbox? Like, oh, I had those days that I literally, the only thing I could do is maybe just take my phone and just scroll, like, and not even get out of bed at times. So it helped me to really empathize a lot more with why grief was so hard, or why depression, anxiety, and hopeless is so hard. And the only thing I could say to end with is, and this from a grief standpoint too, and you speak about it, is yes, it will always be there, but it does get somewhat, I'm not going to say it's easier, it's still hard at times, but I tell people, you have to go through it. If you go around it, everybody has their different grief ways. I don't know if you've seen, I think it's Collateral Beauty, or Beauty Collateral. It's with Will Smith.
No.
Very good movie. Will Smith goes all the way around the long way, and then, his ex goes this way, and she's doing advocacy like I am. And it's the same thing that happened with me and my ex, his dad. He's going this long way. And like anytime I'm with his daughters, Kyle's steps and half sister, and I see them as my own little girls, they want to talk about Kyle. They want to see pictures. They want to reminisce. And so it gives me a time too to tell about their brother, and vice versa. And he immediately will just walk away. And, in that movie, he finally came to a point where he had to be like, okay, I'm tired of this. Like, it's just dragging me down. It's weighing me down even more. It's like an anchor. If you don't head on first with it, and like, and talk about it. And that's where I always tell people, that's where the enemy wants us to have the shame and guilt, and keep our, like, so we're quiet and we're not talking. Like, he would have loved to have kept me in that bed, and keep in depression, anxiety, hopelessness. But I realized, nope, not today, enemy. Like,
You don't
not
get to
today.
win. You don't get to win.
Nope, you already won taking Kyle and taking other people. You're not going to win today. And I'll be transparent. I had bad thoughts. I never had thoughts like that. I remember at one point, um, I've only admitted this to a couple of people, and it's okay. I'll admit this too. Just to be transparent and raw, so that way other people that might be experienced. I remember I thought to myself, what if I get a fentanyl pill and I take it myself? Maybe that's how low and hard and depression I was after losing
Sure.
him, that I thought maybe if I wrote a note and I was like, well, now maybe y'all will pay attention. But then I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe I had those thoughts. But it can happen to any of us, of those thoughts, and that's why the suicide rates are so high, and everything else.
Yes, and they're getting higher
Yes. And
because
if
it's hard to cope in life to begin with, and with everything that's going on in the world
yeah.
now, it's even more. And
Mhm.
I hate to say this, but I really do believe that as time moves forward and people can't cope, there's going to be a lot more suicide,
Yep.
unfortunately.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and I hate to say that out loud, but I just feel like that's where we're going,
Yeah. Well,
you know?
especially if we don't like, we're not doing anything about the mental health thing. Like, and then we just have the big pharma, and that's one of the things I also speak about too, is as soon as I get into talk with especially kids, I always ask them, I'm like, hey, what do you take when you have a headache? And they're like, they'll start listing off the names. What do you take when you have a cold? And every time I'm like, yep, a pill, a pill. Everything was normalized. Even COVID, there was a pill. Like, everything is so normalized that's quick fix, instead of dealing with the actual under root cause, which
Right,
is the depression, anxiety, hopelessness. Like,
right.
and I think, I even admit, for a little bit, I was on some depression pills. I needed something to help me through it for a while, but I
Yes.
knew I didn't want to do it long term. So what I started doing is finding other like natural coping things. Like, I started doing yoga. I started doing like more vitamin C, like, because I
Yeah.
didn't want to always be, even with the car accident, they try to give me, hydrocodone and different things. And I was like,
Yep.
nope, nope. Like, I was like, yes, I'm in pain, but at the same time, I was like, okay, maybe a muscle relaxer here. But I was more aware. And I think that's what I'm glad I knew, is I didn't want to, because it happens to a lot of people. And you'll hear all the time where they never thought that they would have been addicted to something.
Right.
And that's it. Just starts off with that one pill, or that one high, or that one line. And you think you might have control of it, but the drug usually has control of you, and that's why there's a disease for it. So
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest things I always try to tell people, and even families that are dealing with their loved ones that are fighting it, is they're like, why can't they just stop? And it's like, it's hard to,
Yeah.
it's a disease that, we got to get to the root and see why did they even first start doing that. So I think that's my biggest message. And what I tell everybody is, we got to take care of ourselves. We got to take care of our loved ones, and we got to get to the root. And the root is mental health, and we got to start
Yeah.
talking about it. And
And
yeah.
the other thing too is I'm a big advocate for homeopathy because
What's it called?
homeopathy.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
I haven't heard of
I
that.
did a wonderful interview with Dr. Dana Ullman, and
Okay.
he's one of the premier people in homeopathy. And you could see it's episode 165.
Okay. Okay.
And he really gives a good understanding about how it can help with grief. And that's what I wanted to know because I once I learned that there
Hmm.
are so many different, they call them remedies,
Okay.
remedies that can help you deal with the loss of a loved one, or,
Okay. Okay.
grieving the death of a marriage or job or other
Yes.
kind of losses.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
it
You
really
bring.
does help. It's
Yes.
best to go to someone, a classical homeopath, with the
Yes.
initial CCH. And those are the individuals who really know how to prescribe for you. And it's
Yes.
not harmful. It's quite great.
Yeah, yeah.
You
And you know
know?
what? You brought up a good point, and that's one of the things I say too. I wish people talked more about grief. And I think that's the issue is I didn't realize until I was getting my master's. I remember we were in the class was group therapy, right? And we had to pick up a topic to do the group on the class. And I remember
Hmm.
one of my classmates did on grief. And I was like, oh, I'll probably never use this. And and what's crazy is I remember during that time, he started going over, he lost three people. He lost his wife and both of his parents or something all in once.
Oh,
It was like all in the same year. And I remember, oh my gosh. And I empath, like I like could empathize, but not at the same time because it didn't experience it. And then all of a sudden we're doing these exercises. And I was like, and he's like, Stephanie. And I finally zoned out. And what I realized is I hadn't dealt with grief. What I felt like is God was revealing some truth to me, and I had lost a high school boyfriend that I barely had been dating, but he was playing basketball, and I think he had kind of like an underlying heart condition. He died, and because I was that bubbly cheerleader person, when it happened, I acted like fake it till you make it, like, and
yeah.
all of a sudden, when I started going through and taking that class and that doing that thing, I said, "Oh my gosh." And I started sharing with the group and I said, "I've never dealt with that grief." But then I also started realizing I never dealt with any grief, like any breakups or in like, when you move schools or when you're in a car accident or,
Right. Or
we
your
just don't
divorce.
go force. We just don't talk about the grief is a loss of something like, even if it's not the person not there and they're still alive, like it is a lot. Like, and so that's one of the things that's been helpful for me is after Kyle being the worst experience in grief I had, I've had fallings outs with some friends recently, and a lot of it was projection and control they were trying to do. And I realized, okay, not right now. I'm
That's
gonna set
enough.
my boundary with you, and they're probably upset and mad because they're used to old Stephanie. I always say old Stephanie before Kyle and new Stephanie, and
Yeah.
and I'm like, no, I'm not going to people please. I'm not, I'll apologize for what I need to, but I'm not going to apologize for something that's not, in my control or something I did. Like this is a you thing, not a me thing. Like, and
Yeah,
so
and I'm not going to be the Stephanie of old.
yes,
This is me now.
yep.
Um, there are times where I wish I could go back to being the Stephanie I was before, but that's not going to happen.
Nope, I'm very more vulnerable. As I said, I'm like, I'm just gonna tell you because before I would have waited because I would have cared too much what people thought of me or people pleased, and that's just after like God was already kind of working on me before Kyle, and I was learning to be real and raw and not be fake it till you make it, the cheerleading smile. I now feel like people can come to me and approach. I'm not like, feeling,
You don't have the mask on.
yes, exactly, and that's the biggest,
A lot of
biggest.
people in grief put that mask on.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
And they wear that mask for years and years
Yes.
because
Yes.
they're trying to be who everybody else expects them to
Yeah.
be, whether it's their immediate family or their extended family
Yeah. Yep.
at work. You
Nope.
know, they can't bring that down.
Mm-mm. Yep.
And grief, I mean, there are no set ways in grief. In other words, all those um and I've written them in my books and everything about the
Mhm.
stages of grief, but we have to realize that those stages were brought to us from a hospice nurse,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yes.
And she was talking about them based on the person who is dying,
Mm-hmm.
not the ones who are left
Behind.
behind.
Yes.
And so our stages of grief are all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Everybody says, oh, you're in shock right in the beginning. Well, you might be, but you might also be really pissed off. So
Yes.
now your anger is up front. It's
Yep.
not going to wait down the line. It's going to
Yes.
be now,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know?
Yes. No, I agree. And I think the biggest thing that I also tell some of the families that are first coming on too is it's so much excruciating pain at first that I have to remind them. And I'm so glad someone else told me this and I read a book about it. And I can't remember the book. It's actually a gentleman. He's a LPC, I think, in the Dallas Fort Worth area. He got in a car wreck, and he lost his wife and one of the kids, or two of the kids, and one of them lived. So it's just him and one of the kids. And he talks about love. And that's why, like, I'm so used to giving my love to Kyle that now that it's gone, there's this hole, and I don't have anywhere I'm giving it to or loving on. And so that's one of the things that really helped me to realize is why I was feeling that pain, is because I loved a human person. Like it just, and once I realized, okay, now what can I do with this love? Like, now I can't give it to him. Okay, where and what can I focus it on? And so that's where I learned to turn that pain into purpose. But then
Hmm.
also give it to people that, like, for example, other single mothers that, I remember what it was like, and I didn't have a babysitter. That's why I was a little late getting on our call, is because I saw her post and she needed, a sitter, and I'm like, I'll do it, so, and she needs other times, and she's just trying to go back to school. And I remember those days. I mean, luckily I had a huge support system, but she doesn't. So it's putting that love in different places, if you can't, since you can't give it to that person anymore.
That's a very, very good point.
Yep.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Stephanie.
Yes. Thank you, Mary. Thank you for reaching out. And I'm glad you're going to be doing these episodes. And I'll send you your next couple of people, because I know I
That
will
would be
probably get it.
wonderful. That
Yes.
would be
Yes.
wonderful. I've wanted to do this since the beginning of the year and it just never came together. And now all of a sudden, out of the blue, I'm watching Governor Abbott signing 4 new laws into law. And the thing that stood out for me too is when they spoke about how both sides of the aisle, every one of
Yes.
the legislators in the Senate, and then is it your assembly or is it your house? How do you say it in
Well, that's
Texas?
yeah. Well, I think it's kind of. I think it's the house, if I remember.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
both the Senate and the House were all on board for this.
Yep. Yep.
And that was wonderful.
Yeah.
And I am so impressed with Governor Abbott. I have been for a long time. I
Yes.
really wish he could close the border for you,
Yes.
for Texas,
Yes. Yes.
because we came so close, didn't we?
Yes. We did.
And maybe that'll
Yes.
happen in the future. But for
Yes.
now, I give him a lot of credit for, doing all that he does
Yes.
on
I do
behalf
too.
of on behalf of all these
Yes.
issues that are coming up through the border.
No, I agree.
So thank you, Governor Abbott,
Yes.
for
Thank you
all
as
your hard work and
yes.
all the sheriffs and all
Yes.
the other departments and the
Yes.
legislature.
Yep.
So we
Yep.
applaud them.
Yes. 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 And hopefully, what we're hoping is it will be a ripple effect, that now that Texas is kind of doing it, then Florida, and all the ones that are also, maybe they'll just all take on be like, oh, what are y'all doing there? Because
Well,
we,
you have the blueprint now.
yes, we'll have the blueprint. So we'll be like, and we're not going to even probably be like, we're not going to be selling it. We're going to be like, here, please do it, because we
Yeah.
don't want any more, like, of how much excruciating pain all of us have been through. Like, Stephanie and, Carol Lou Bell, they started Angel Mom group, and it's going to be Angel Mom and Dad group, and that is just growing right now of everybody. And so it's a community for the grieving as well, and so that's one of the things that we talk about, is that we have to come together to do all this, and we can't do it alone. So we're asking
And
everybody else.
I'm really glad you're getting all those individuals, all those parents and brothers and sisters together,
Yes.
because I always say the very best support you can find is for someone who has experienced the
Yes,
exact
exactly.
type
Yeah.
of death
Yes.
that
Yes.
you have. Because then when they say to you, I do understand what you're
Yep.
going through, they
Yep.
really do.
Yes, they do. And
Okay, it's not just somebody who said, "Oh, my fish died," and I know what you feel like. Well, I don't think this. I don't think so.
yeah, you're right. Oh yes, you're talking to the choir, because I remember when that happened. I'm like, that's not the same that your dog died, but okay. Like, I mean, I understand it. A dog can be like your kid, but it's
Yes,
totally different. This child was in me for 9 months, and I birthed out. Like, there's a total difference of this.
yes, exactly. Well, thank you again.
Yes, well, I appreciate you, and keep doing what you're doing, and I'm so glad that you heard what you needed to be doing, and you're still going on and still doing,
After
this.
very, very many years.
Yes, yes.
And I often do. I sometimes think I'm still doing, why am I still doing this? But God keeps giving me direction.
There you go. I love
So I just take it and keep moving forward.
Yes. Yep. Nope. I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for your time, and you have a good
Thank you.
night and the rest of the day.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank
And
you.
we will definitely see each other again.
Yes. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.